I'll just be showing you what KeyShot is all about and how easy it is to take your raw data and make it look nice. We'll just start out here. First of all, here's our website. You can see this is an example of the kind of images we make. This is actually a more complex thing than a lot of you are going to be making. More often than not, you just want to see your product in ray tracing so you can see what lighting looks like, just like on it. So it's also in the gallery here. Plenty of relevant examples, marketing images, a lot of things like this. And I'll just get right into it, showing you how to make these images. And I'll show you a couple of things later on our forum and things like that. I'm going to minimize this and go right into KeyShot here. Okay. I'm just going to be audio is bad. Let me see what I can do here. Okay. Let me call in on the phone. Not let me cut out the whole thing. So give me 1 second.
Sorry about that, everyone. He's gonna, if you didn't hear what he said, he's gonna call in on the phone and hopefully clear up some of these audio issues. So bear with us 1 moment, please.
Okay. Okay, whatever. Okay. Sorry about that. Let me know in the questions if there's still any problems. But really, that sounds better. So I have some people saying it sounds good, some not. Much better. Okay, that's great to hear. I'm going to put it on speakerphone so I can have my hands free. Okay. Let's get down to it. So we have KeyShot here, and right now I have one of our pre-made bits loaded. And you can see it's real-time ray tracing, which means just going through here, and we have accurate lighting based on a three-dimensional image or an HDRI image that's basically a sphere wrapped around the model. And you can see reflections of the model. You can see the reflection of the environment here. And what I'm going to do is clear out the scene and start fresh with a brand new model. So, in fact, I'll just close KeyShot here. I'll show you right from the beginning. KeyShot 64. Here we are. And this is our blank scene in our blank studio environment. File, import, or the import button right here. I'm going to navigate over to a model here and bring in this staple remover. And when you import some data, you get some options like merging with current themes so that you can add models and things like that. So this, just going to click OK. And there it is. Right now, this is a model coming out of Maya that just has some default materials applied to it. And before I move on to the next step of actually applying materials, I'm going to quickly rotate this model so that we get it into a more proper orientation. I do this by just opening up the options menu. And I'm already in the right tab here, the scene tab, and I can click on my staple remover and go to my rotations. In this case, I know I need to rotate on the x-axis, just 90 degrees. And of course, I can go in and add a little extra rotation or open up the actual move objects manipulator here by right-clicking and just easily modify its position there. Something about like that's going to work. And then, of course, I can snap that to the ground so that we have it kind of sitting on the ground. Just bring that down a little further. And there we go. So that's it for moving the object. That's going to work for the rest of the scene. And of course, you can go in and be more precise and get all the points touching the ground. But that's just fine like that. I'm going to go ahead and close my options menu just by pressing the space bar and open up the materials library. And here we have all of the pre-made materials that we include with KeyShot. And for most of your projects, these materials are going to work just fine. You can go in and go into subcategories like plastics or metals. And when you find a material you want to use, you just simply drag and drop it onto your model, and it applies. You'll even notice that as you drag the material onto different parts of your model, if you don't let go of the mouse, it actually will give you a preview of what it's going to look like. And if you're not happy with it, you can just leave it over in the library. So this one looks good. It actually has a texture on it, so we're going to worry about modifying that texture and make it look a little better later. But let's go ahead and find a plastic for the rest of this. Plastic. And you can even search in these categories. You know, I can put in black. That'll find basically my black plastics. And I can increase the size of these thumbnails so I can see what I'm looking at. I can just drag that on there. And for this model, that's about it. That's all I need the materials library for. And so I can move on to the next step, which is looking at some different environments. You can see currently in the startup environment, you get these kind of reflections, a very soft studio, so we don't get a lot of nice, sharp reflections. So if I just click environment here, I can browse through all of the pre-made environments that we include. I can try out some of these, and some of them are studios and others are actual real-life scenes. So let's just try a couple of these. Dragging onto this is a more dark, dramatic environment. And you can see that if I zoom out, we can look at some of the light sources in here. For example, this large panel of light is actually going to create some very interesting reflections on my model, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm just looking for an environment that creates some nice reflection. So let's say I want to compose an image something like this, then that reflection there is nice. So maybe that's not exactly the camera angle I want. Maybe I want to change it up to something over here, and I don't exactly want this reflection. Well, I can just use a hotkey, which is Control left mouse button, to rotate my environment around, and I can find a new reflection. If I zoom out here, do that same hotkey, Control left click, you can see how the environment's actually rotating. So I'm just going to bring my camera in and look at that some more. You can create some nice lighting effects this way. Speaking of hotkeys, you can actually press the K key to get a list of all of the hotkeys that are relevant. So for example, environment, Control left mouse drag is rotate environment image. Let's try out a couple different environments. Let's bring in the factory here. This is a nice environment for when you want to create sort of industrial look. You can see some of the lighting effects here. We have some nice bright points of light on this one. You'll also notice that you have all of the reflections and lighting being based on this image alone, and that includes the ground shadow. So if I bring in an environment that has a nice sharp sun, it will actually cast a nice sharp ground shadow, and you can see how there's a shadow being cast from these wings up here down onto the ground. Now if I bring in a soft studio environment, that shadow becomes much more diffused, and we don't have those sharp shadows. So let's bring in a couple more here. That one's pretty nice. So let's work with that. Now, you can, of course, just stick with the standard environments, and you can, of course, modify them as well. But for now, let's complete this image just by using this environment and not adjusting anything. The next thing I might do is just go over to my backplates And there's some backplates in here that you can use, but a lot of them, these are actually all photographic ones. So let me bring in just a more abstract one. So instead of going to my backplate here, I'm going to actually open up the options menu, go over to the backplates tab, double click on this little image, then I can go ahead and find my own backplate. We can use this orange one, but for this, since I don't have any color on the model, I might actually just use the black and white version. And you can see a nice abstract backplate like this can add some interest to your render. You can position this just using the camera controls, which again, you can see all the camera controls by hitting K to bring up the hotkeys list. Now let's say I wanted to make this a little more interesting by adjusting some settings. It's very easy to just use all of our preset materials and environments, but sometimes you want that extra control. For example, in this model, you might want to adjust the texture on these metal pieces here. As you can see, the mapping actually coming from the modeling software isn't ideal. So I'm going to double-click on this. And then you double-click on any part in the scene. It's going to bring up the material properties for that part. And in this case, it's metal. And in addition to being actually a texture and bump map applied to it. So what we need to do is just a couple of things. And the first thing we want to do is just get our texture and our bump map at least synchronous so that any adjustment we make is going to happen in both of them. Because in this case, they kind of correspond. There's a bump map that is based on the actual color map as well. So you have the actual black and white lines here working with the bump map. So I'll show you the difference first before we move on to adjusting the mapping. With the color map, let me just disable the bump map. The color map, you can just see the coloration of the material. You have darker and lighter spots. If I disable that, you just have a nice, clean, perfect surface. If I bring the bump map in alone, you'll see that it creates the effect of a bump on the surface. And you have here a bump height slider. And as I increase that, you get a more and more bumpy surface. In this case, we just want a really nice subtle bump. And we actually need to adjust the mapping of this bump map so that it doesn't have this sort of strange mapping along here. In this case, I'm just going to use a very basic box map and not worry too much about it. Just have to box and be done. The only thing beyond that will be to increase the scale a little bit. As you might notice, it's a bit hard to see right now. I just bring the scale up, and maybe the bump height up just a bit. Start to see that again. Now, also, this bump map is supposed to create a brushed look. So it already looks pretty good, but one thing you might be able to do is stretch the texture out a little bit so that the brush strokes are actually longer. The way we do that is disable keep aspect ratio. We just scale one of the scales non-uniformly from the other. So bring scale U down and maybe scale V up. And that starts to stretch out the texture so that we get a more pronounced brushed look. Hopefully that's coming through the webinar. Now, in addition to the bump map, we can enable the texture, which is the color map, by just clicking Enable. You'll notice right now the texture is actually still set to UV coordinates, and the scale is still set to 0.5 and 0.5, while the bump map is set to a box map in 0.610 and 1.790. In order to get those two synced together, let's just click Sync. Then we can just check this by changing the scale a bit. You can see how those link together now. So any change I make here, it will also be made here.